And we are now recording. I'm going to make a little disclaimer before we start our discussion. I am Stephanie Rollins, a graduate student at Lee Tourneau University. This is my volunteer, Zilbia Park. Now, what we are doing today is, this is just a practice counseling session for learning purposes. I am not a professional counselor. I am a graduate student. Again, this is not a real counseling session. It is for learning and practice purposes only. Zilbia, thank you for volunteering, and today I would like to just take a few minutes to discuss anything that is on your mind today that you might like to share and feel comfortable going over. And I apologize for any background noise. That is the byproduct of doing this at home.
Well, let me see. I'm 61. I'm a retired adult probation officer. I did that for 25 years. I was blessed to get to retire when I was 51. So this month, and this will make 10 years I've been retired. And I tell people that, and when they meet me, the first thing they say is, how could you do a job like that? I mean, you don't seem like you're a mean woman, or you don't seem very harsh and cold. There are a lot of misconceptions about that. People on probation, they're like you and I. By the grace of God, that some of us aren't on probation, and people seem to think that it's a terrible thing to do, but sometimes I found it from some of my clientele, it was like a blessing in disguise. I was an adult probation officer right out of college. Right out of college, I took a year to become a guard in prison because I needed experience to be an adult probation officer. And that was definitely an eye-opener. I was, I believe, 21, and I did it for a year, and I was in Gatesville, Texas. Of course, this is Georgetown, so it's about 36 miles from here. And I was in a women's facility. And that was real interesting because I was out of college, naive about life and a lot of things, but these women were a real education. And I learned there that also women there that were in prison came from all walks of life. And there's always, like I said, a misconception. People think that if you're in prison or on probation or on parole, you're the scum of the earth or the uneducated or the indigent. Now, I'm here to tell you that throughout my career, I had doctors, lawyers, probation officers, ministers, nurses, everybody from all walks of life get on probation, even the elderly.
Did that surprise you? Did you expect to see that range of education and socioeconomic status in that situation?
Well, yes, because I grew up in I don't like the word poor because everybody back then, you don't miss what you don't have, and everybody back then barely scraped by, but that's what we knew. And so what happened was, and it seemed like my mother and my parents were very strict, and of course we knew as kids not to drink, not to smoke, not to use drugs, so we were raised very strict. We knew right from wrong. But there were other kids in my neighborhood that knew the same and grew up with, they were trying to instill the same morals and values on them, but they chose a different path. So to me, growing up in a neighborhood that was, we had blacks, we had Mexicans, we had Italians, we had Caucasians, so we were mixed. And it seemed like some of the kids chose a different path and would get in trouble. So it seemed like because we were from the other side of the tracks, people always, you kind of grew up with, well, they were poor and didn't know any better. They weren't as educated and didn't know it better. But they did because the parents tried to raise us all well. And I've always said, where I compare us to a bunch of horses in a chute. There's a bunch of horses, and there's a path. And, you try to get these horses to get out of the chute, go straight, stay on this line, and just keep going and do the right thing. Every now and then, you can train a horse to do that, but every now and then you'll find one or two horses that, instead of staying on the path, they're going to wander off. And that's where they wander off because they want to explore or do something different, and that's where they end up with a broken leg, or they end up lost or whatever. But if you stay on the path, because there's a path, life is a path. If you do the right thing, and if you incorporate God in your life, you know what you need. You know right from wrong. And once you start deviating from that, that's where you get in trouble. So yes, I guess back to the question was, at the time I was, because of my background, and people always say, well, you know, these kids that come from the wrong side of the tracks or aren't as rich, they don't have the same benefits, so they're going to do bad. That's not true. That's not true. I know very poor kids that have been very successful. And as I said, as in prison, as a guard in prison, as a retired adult probation, as a probation officer, I saw the most educated, that had opportunities kind of veer off like that horse. They got off the path and ended up in trouble and things like that.
That's a very interesting analogy. I like that. But I want to clarify. You were a guard in a prison before you were an adult probation officer.
That is correct. Right as I obtained a bachelor's in 2.5 years. I took anywhere from 18 to 24 hours. I lived in the dorm for 2.5 years. My mother says, get your butt in college, get your degree, and get out of there. So I obtained my bachelor's, and right out of that, I went and applied to be an adult probation officer. And I remember the chief. His name was Allison Joyce. He was a minister on the weekends and a director of an adult probation officer. And I remember him telling me, he said, Sylvie, he says, you have the education, but you also need a year's experience. So he says, go somewhere, find you a job, even juvenile probation, the prison system, a correctional officer, a jailer, do something. Well, I decided I'd always been interested in women in prison. And so I went, I happened to call the warden, and somehow I got straight through the warden and told her that I just graduated from college and that I wanted to become a guard in prison and see how the prison system worked. And later on, I would decide what I would do with myself. So she made an appointment. She hired me on the spot, and I became a guard in prison for a year, and it was very interesting. Gosh, like I said, I was 21, probably weighed 110 pounds. Some of these women were really hardcore. Back then, they segregated the women. I remember they were dorms A through H. And I remember H because H was for the elderly women.
Oh.
I mean, women that were probably anywhere from, and when you're 19, you think 30's old, but at 21, you think 30's old, but these women were probably 60 and above. And I remember the G dorm was called the gay dorm. Back then, of course, it's not as prominent, or I guess it's not as open as it is today, but I remember being in the G dorm, and it was the lesbian dorm. The A dorm were the very young first-time offenders. The B dorm, I can remember they segregated. We had a lot of, in Texas, we're about 2 hours from San Antonio, Texas. A lot of crime in San Antonio, and we had a lot of women in gangs. And I remember they even had to separate some of the women in different gangs because they would hurt each other. And like I said, so they had all these dorms, and they had different types of women from even where they were from had made a big significant influence. Then they had a dorm where they had the ones that were mentally challenged. Of course, that's politically incorrect today, but they had some difficulties and stuff, and it was really interesting.
So, just to make sure I heard you correctly, you went through a bachelor's college degree program in 2.5 years. You were in a hurry to get on with your career, or? That's amazing.
Well, money was tight, and the longer you stay in college and live in a dorm, all that adds up. You have to have meal plans and books and this and that. So, I told my mom I would live in a dorm. I didn't have a car, a lot of transportation at the time, and, it was either buy a car or go to college, and, Mom says one or the other, and I thought, no, I can always my family can help transport me and stuff. I can take a bus, and I'm going to get my degree and do something with my life. I was out because I was from the other side of the tracks, and Mom always instilled that you get a good education, you learn to take care of yourself, you don't depend on anyone, and Mother was right. My mom, bless her heart, married when she was 19 and never was married to my father. He was killed when I was in college, in fact. I was 19 when he was killed in a car wreck. But she didn't have the opportunity. She's not formally educated. She quit school to help, run the farm and things like that. And so it was real important for her kids to get an education and not depend on anybody but themselves.
Understand.
So that's why I decided to get a bachelor's as quickly as I could, and get out of school and get a career, and it paid off.
It sounds like you had a plan, you followed that plan, and you were the horse out of the gate that stayed on that straight path.
That is correct. When I came out of the chute, I stayed on that path because I knew that was the right thing to do. Every now and then people say, I am 61 now? I've never even smoked pot. I've never done illegal drugs. I don't even like to take prescription medication. And I've always been kind of what is the word? A straight kid and stuff. As a kid, I remember hanging out at the police station or going to the police station because I wanted to see the inside of the police station, and I wanted to touch the policemen's guns and things like that. So I always knew that I was going to be a good kid, and of course, I had Mom instilled that in us, but Mom was very strict and my dad was very strict, and I got enough whippings and spankings, so because I had a big mouth, I've always been outspoken, so I knew not to do anything illegal or wrong. So yes, I was one of the horses that stayed on that path.
Do you feel that this background that you are educated in and experienced in that field of corrections and probation, do you feel it affected your perspective on people, on life, in general?
Yes, well, Mom was, like I said, Mom was less fortunate. She had 7 children. She was stuck at home. She was a homemaker. Mom tended to get a little down, a little negative. My career, I saw all walks of life. I did learn a few things, and I guess one of the most valuable things that my career taught me is there's good in everybody. You can find the worst person, the most unattractive person, the most obese. There's good in all of us. We all have good. We all have bad. But I don't care, even the women that are in prison, that were in there for murder or this or that, there was some good in them. We're all God's creatures. And like I said, everybody just chooses a different path. They don't stay on a path. But some people get off. But yes, I feel like everybody has good in them. Everybody can be good. And I find that in my personal life, like in my professional life, my clientele would come in, they were just placed on probation. They're angry. Some of them have been accused of, allegedly, let's put it this way, I've known of people that were innocent that have been in the system, in prison and on probation. And
that had to be hard for both of you to know that someone was innocent and they were being punished for that. Whatever was ascribed to them doing. Was that hard for you? Did you?
Yes, but it didn't happen often. But yes, once in a while you would find someone that, because they had such a bad rap, they'd been in the system before, they burglarized houses all the time, they did these bad things, and this one time they'd say, even in court they'd say, hey, I'm a bad person. I've done this before, but this time it wasn't me. It's Joe Blow up the street. But, the police, they find evidence or whatever, and um, when you have a reputable police officer and a few things against you, uh,
It's hard to
it's hard to overlook that and stuff. And yes,
history.
and but they did what they were supposed to, and they always said, well, this is what I get because this is the path that I chose. And for the first time, I'm trying to do the right thing. I was doing the right thing, and now look, so they get this attitude of, well, when I get off of this, I'm going to go do something because I paid the time. And I thought, don't do that. This is the kind of thinking that has you in this place in the first. Has you here in the first place. If you're really innocent, then you turn your life over to God. And if you want to really redeem yourself, then you change.
Some of the things you mentioned, such as telling them that that's not a good idea, or turning their life over to God. Did you have the opportunity as a probation officer to counsel in any way to maybe change their distorted thinking?
We had a lot of resources. Well, they have a lot more today, but we had cognitive classes. We would send them to different things like that to try to get them to think. Some of them
Process.
Yes, it's like sometimes people don't think about. They live for today, or they don't think about the consequences, or they don't think about what
long term.
Yes, they live in the moment, and I used to always try to make my people think. I had a kid on probation, and he did odd jobs, so sometimes he had $5 for the week, and so what he would do is he would go to Sonic and borrow $5 and to eat for that one day, and then the rest of the week, he got paid on from Monday to Monday, and I explained to him. I said, you've got $5 or $10 to eat this week. Why do you go buy an elaborate $10 meal, $5 or $10 meal? I said, go to the store, get you a loaf of bread, go get you a bag go get you some sandwich meat. I said, you can have a sandwich every day, and until you get paid again. And he couldn't understand it. He goes, never thought to do that. He says, so I would try to make him think, buy yourself enough to get by until the next payday and stuff like that. But people can't process that, or they can't figure that out. It's like, I got to eat today. I'm going to live for the moment, and then tomorrow comes and like, what am I going to do today? And so I would always try to think to get my clientele to think about tomorrow. Not that you need to live in the present, but in their case, they never learned the skills to think about tomorrow, and you have to kind of teach them that. I wasn't a counselor, I was a probation officer, but I would, like I said, talk to them about cognitive thinking and send them to classes. And they had alcohol problem, I'd send them to alcohol classes, drug, whatever it was. Some of them just even had life skills. Some of them didn't have the basic skills that you and I would have. And I would just try to tell them, get into church, get into Sunday school, all this you can learn. You can learn. And that's something else, I guess, when you asked earlier in my career, we're never too old to learn. Whether it's just to learn what you want to learn. It's out there. You just have to want.
Right. And some of those common things you were mentioning, people think this is common sense, but again, if they weren't taught these common things to begin with, even some of the simple things, we can't expect them to know these kind of things. It doesn't matter where it comes from, you or church, or they still have to be taught some of these simple budgeting, planning, different ways of thinking because they were maybe never shown these ways of thinking. Zoe, I appreciate you taking the time to volunteer and share some of these things. Is there anything you want to add or anything else you...
No, I've enjoyed it. Thank you for asking me this, to do this. I've enjoyed this, and like I said, even now I'm retired, but every time I meet someone and they're in a bad mood, or at the grocery store, or at road rage or whatever, I always just say a prayer for them and think, we all have things, and instead of being abrupt with them or being rude back, you just kind of kill them with kindness. My mom always said that, kill people with kindness because you never know what they're going through. We all have things that we go through. And,
Right.
On a day-to-day when you run it, I even, like I said, when I leave here and I find somebody that I'm going too slow or whatever, and they shoot me the bird or whatever, I just wave back and go, God bless you. Just always try to find the good in everybody and anything.
And
Life is a blessing.
so sorry for that distraction.
I'm
But you're right, and that takes practice, actually. It takes practice to control your responses and not to have someone else dictate how you respond and behave.
That's true. You control everything that you do. And when you let someone upset you or someone mistreats you, remember, they do it because you let them. You allow things to happen.
Thank you again.
Thank you.